Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I have with me the distinguished diplomat, Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad Sahab, who has served as India's ambassador to several countries, and especially to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, the key countries with regards to the topic that we are addressing today. And the topic is the exit of United Arab Emirates from OPEC, which is probably a major blow to OPEC itself, and what its ramifications and implications are. Ambassador Saab, welcome to Khanversations.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
You are very popular with my audience, and so I'm obviously always delighted when you're with us. So this came as a huge surprise. United Arab Emirates simply announced that as of May 1st, they are no more part of OPEC, and apparently they did this even without consulting with the Saudis on this issue or having some back channel discussions with them. And for some people who were in the know, they are not very surprised because there have been all these quota-related issues going on. The UAE has invested heavily into expanding its production capacity, and so there is an economic strategic autonomy side of it to OPEC. So I wanted to get from you your instant reaction as to why now? Why didn't UAE wait till the war is over and things settle down before making this decision to leave OPEC, and how does it hurt OPEC, and how does it impact the Gulf?
There are two or three issues which are in the picture, which have come into play at the same time. You have, number one, an issue that goes back at least 5 years, if not more, when the UAE has had a grievance, a persisting grievance, with regard to the capacity that it has at home in terms of oil production and the baseline that the OPEC Plus have been using to fix quotas. The baseline that they use as of now from 2018, 2019 is 3.2 million barrels a day. Their actual capacity has been going up. Unlike other producers, UAE had come into oil production fairly late, only in the 1960s, and it has an extraordinary reserve. They have been focusing on capacity expansion, and they are targeting reaching 5 million barrels a day next year. So they are almost there. But the baseline has prevented them from actually supplying a large part of their potential into the international market. There is a deep divide here between the UAE's interest and the Saudi interest. The Saudi is already a very major producer. Saudi interests are in high prices. UAE interests are in high production and supply. So there is a divide here. There have been criticisms from the UAE side earlier. In 2021, they had threatened to withdraw from the quotas, and they were placated when their baseline was slightly increased. I think it was to 3.6 million barrels a day. But obviously, the UAE has continued to expand. So this is one side of the story. It's a very old side of the story. The other issues relate to the Iran war on the one hand, and the divide that it has had with the Saudi Arabia. All of this is of recent origin. Now let us look at it again. As far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, yes, there have been differences between the two major GCC partners over a few years. But recently, more specifically, it has been around Yemen. The UAE has been encouraging, or has been seen to be encouraging, a secessionist movement in South Yemen. And if that were to be separated, if South Yemen were to be separated from the other part of Yemen, indeed going back to the old divide up to 1991 between North Yemen and South Yemen, a part of South Yemen would have actually reached the Saudi border. And this the Saudis thought was a security interest and concern. Separately, the Emiratis have been building up their ties with Israel. And dramatically, you saw that the Israelis announced on 26 December last year that they would recognize the separation of Somaliland. So that the Israeli presence is now at Somaliland, and Somaliland, a breakaway province of Somalia, has 850 kilometers of coastline in the Gulf of Aden. So it indicates that it is a possible threat, security threat to Saudi Arabia on the one hand and to Egypt on the other. The third point to be noted is very quietly, the Emirates has been building up its ties with Somaliland, a breakaway province, and has also established very close ties with Ethiopia. Indeed, on 1st January 2024, you had Ethiopia signing an MOU with Somaliland, in terms of which it would have access to a newly developed port at Berbera, so that Ethiopia would have become a naval presence in the Gulf of Aden. All of these have been matters of concern. The third point relates to Iran. And this is what the Emiratis have publicly stated, that the bulk of the Iranian attacks on Gulf targets have been on the UAE. According to public reports, 500 missiles and 2,000 drones were targeting various UAE sites, including iconic towers, hotels, five-star hotels, etc. And the Emiratis have said publicly no one came to their assistance. And at the GCC conclave recently, their spokesperson very strongly said that this is the lowest point in terms of GCC affiliation, and because GCC, in fact, UAE felt effectively abandoned, and within a day of this meeting, they announced their withdrawal from the OPEC. As of now, there were rumors immediately that they might withdraw from other conclaves in the region, other entities in the region, like the Arab League or even the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation, but they have announced that they will not do so with regard to any other. So you have a very serious divide now in the region within the ranks of the GCC. And that is what we are looking at, three factors coming together in terms of the issues at stake and in terms of the timing of the decision.
Yes, I mean, when I was looking at this stuff, it was very clear that the Saudis, because they have invested in all these vision projects, their Nome city and all of this, they are desperate to keep the price of oil at $80 is the one that the Saudis want. Otherwise, they will go into debt. And so they are determined to control the price. But the GCC's response to the Iran war is quite... it is difficult to comprehend, because in the beginning, everyone was surprised that Iran attacked all GCC countries, including Oman. And so the perception was that this would be a uniting factor, and all the differences within the GCC countries would evaporate in the face of this major common threat from Iran. And so they would all, start working together. I heard some people from the region in various conferences here in the US saying that they are even working towards a common command and control. So they're going to coordinate their military defense in future against Iran. And now we see a whole spectrum of responses, right? From Oman, which seems to be willing to negotiate. I mean, the Iranian foreign minister just visited Muscat, to at the other end where UAE is saying that the only country that has actually come and supported them militarily has been the Israelis. In fact, it seems that the Israelis have deployed some of their latest weapons, which they have not yet even tested. So the Israelis have come across to be the best friends as far as UAE is concerned. One of their proxies here in Washington was complaining and saying, where was the Egyptian Air Force? Why did it not defend UAE? It was the Israelis who have defended us. So when 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 it really mattered, the Abraham Accords has worked for UAE. Is this going to change the complete security dynamics of the Gulf? Like, what is the incentive for even GCC to exist as GCC? Will it be out? And does this also mean that Israel will now have a very strong physical presence in the Gulf militarily? Like, if I see that Israel is probably becoming using UAE as a forward military position against Iran.
Straight away, one or two comments. Number one, I would really wish our GCC brethren would speak out more publicly and forcefully about who started the war. This should be the Iranians did not start the war. The Iranians had no interest in the war.
Yeah.
The Iranians have been hit very hard by the war. They were actually engaged in serious dialogue with the American side. And abruptly you see, in a set of circumstances, Israel and the United States unleashed the conflict, unleashed the war. We know that the GCC may have counseled the Americans, but never strongly enough. So that is the origin of the problem. Now, once the conflict has begun, any one of us would have made it clear to the powers that be, and indeed the GCC leaders knew about this, because when they counseled restraint on the Americans, they made it clear that they would be targeted. So it is not as if it has come as a shock. Every one of them accommodates a very large number of American military personnel. We were told that before the massive deployment ordered by Donald Trump, once the war had started, a little before the conflict, already 50,000 American troops were located in the 6 countries of the GCC. Bahrain has the naval headquarters and Qatar has the air force headquarters. All of them are located there. Are you going to pretend to me that once a massive assault has been unleashed upon Iran, its top leadership is assassinated on day one, including the supreme leader, the Iranians are going to turn over and go to sleep? They are going to target the people whom they can reach. They don't have conventional capacity. Whatever they have is in terms of missiles and drones, and they could use them only as effectively as they could. And we now know what is now reported much more extensively in the American media than earlier, that the Iranians did a lot of damage on American military targets. Now let us look at the scenario, the regional strategic scenario. The GCC countries were never constructed to ensure their own, to be capable of looking after their own security. They were always going to depend on Western powers. Initially, they depended on the British. As the British withdrew, the Americans came into the picture. But may I remind again my GCC brethren, I do not recall a single occasion when the Americans took action in the region in support of GCC interests. They always intervened militarily in the region in support of what the president of the day thought was his own interest and the United States interest. Who have the Americans accommodated in their thinking and in their strategic responses? Israel. They have always prioritized Israeli interests over GCC interests. In the war of 2001, in the war of 2003, and even earlier in the 1990s during the dual containment regime, it is the Americans who were pursuing Israeli interests in West Asia through military intervention, never the GCC interests. And they were supposed to be the guardians of GCC security. I don't remember when they took a single piece of action that would have ensured GCC interests. On the other hand, everything they did has harmed GCC security seriously. Look at the regime change of Iraq. Every GCC leader counseled the Americans not to do regime change in Iraq. because they said you will create an opportunity on the basis of Shia empowerment for the Iranians to enter the picture, and that is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
They also counseled very strongly the Americans not to unleash this conflict. And this rubbish, this misinformation that has been coming out in American media. Oh, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia pleaded with Trump for the war. This is absolute nonsense. No GCC leader wanted war because every one of them knew that they would be targeted. And exactly that has happened.
Yes, I mean, and if you recall, in 2019, when the Iranians attacked Saudi Arabia, there was absolutely nothing that happened. And Trump was president. He did not retaliate or even comment.
I agree with you. That was a test case. Yeah. Why did the GCC countries turn away from the Americans as security guarantor? That was the last straw. Because the Saudis saw that their 1 week's production has been halted by those 3 missile attacks. No beep from the American side. These people followed everything. The Americans withdrew from the JCPOA. At that time, the GCC was apparently pleased about it, very foolishly, because they should have thought through the full implications of this. They have been dealing with an American president who has never given any indication that he has any understanding of the scenario in West Asia or has any interest as far as the region's interests are concerned. He has none of that. He was so easily allured into war by the blandishments of Netanyahu. Netanyahu spent a few hours with him on February 11th in the White House and was able to persuade the American president that we can achieve regime change in a day or so, maximum 3 or 4 days. And you will go down in history as the greatest American president, even better than Abraham Lincoln. He also pressed the buttons of Netanyahu, of Donald Trump's vulnerability, his megalomania, his wanting to strut on the world stage, to pretend he's Augustus Caesar or maybe General Maxwell, General Patton, and that he will do. And you know how he stands from time to time, this way, this way. Pretending, showing half his profile and pretending to be a general. That is how he was allured. Is this how you do decision making in the United States? You go to war, thousands of people are killed, and you don't even know why you got in and how to get out.
What was interesting was that the meeting that you referred to, after that, there was another meeting with the U.S. intelligence and U.S. defense, in which General Kane described Netanyahu's presentation to Trump as farcical. Absolutely. He used the word farcical. So Marco Rubio, who's sitting there, thought that perhaps Trump would not understand the word farcical. And so he actually translated that for Trump and said, what the general means is, this is bullshit. And so even the closest ally, Marco Rubio, has been a major hawk when it comes to being pro-Israel and anti-Iran. But even he thought that what Netanyahu was saying was
all these courtiers around Donald Trump are looking for the next election.
Yes.
And they think they will strut on the American stage. They are building constituencies now. I was shocked to read today that sections of the MAGA have started attacking the vice president for being opposed to the Iran war, saying that you are building a constituency for your presidential aspirations. This is the state of affairs in the United States.
Things are very bad. For poor J.D. Vance, he's going to also have this whole problem of, his wife is from Andhra Pradesh, Usha Vance, and there's a lot of demand that she convert to Christianity. And so the poor guy is trying his best to distance himself from the Trump. He's the only guy who's understood that Trump is going to sink the Republican Party. So I want to come back to what you think is going to happen. There has been a huge transfer of weapons to the Middle East. In the last 48 hours, America transferred about 6,500 tons of weapons to Israel alone. And then, according to lots of open source intelligence, they sent 30 C-130 planes of transport with weapons to Qatar, for example, and other parts in the Middle East. They have not released where else they have gone, whether they're going to UAE, Saudi Arabia, or other places. So there's a clear transfer of weapons, but it also appears that there is a fear that now, if the US were to attack Iran again, Iran may retaliate much more brutally against the oil infrastructure, not against the defense infrastructure, hitting the global economy harder. So it's very difficult to predict what Donald Trump does because he doesn't act rationally, so we can't use rational arguments to guess. But what do you think are the Iranians hoping to achieve from this? Because even their economy is being hurt by the closure and the blockade of Hormuz. And from the way China and the Russians they have supported Iran a little bit, but they're not, even the Chinese don't want this thing to go on for a long period of time because their economy is also being hurt by this.
Every section of the international community wants a ceasefire. They want the belligerents to come to the table, talk to each other. Nobody pretends that you can have conflict resolution. What all of us would like to see is conflict management. Talk to each other, try to see over a period of time where you can agree with each other. Israel succeeded in ensuring that this would not be pursued. But I'm not sure Israel should carry too much credibility. I know that they have a genius in Prime Minister Netanyahu, an extraordinarily wily and amoral individual who has an extraordinary capacity to manipulate American presidents. But I think that the surge of opposition against him within Israel itself, the emergence of opposition forces indicates that within Israel too, they are now fed up with the president and with his propensity to constantly go to war to safeguard his own personal and political career. Now, looking at I don't think either Iran or the United States want to war. There should have been a ceasefire at least 3-4 weeks ago. It has been in a stalemate since then. And because of that, the scenario has deteriorated. As of now, the Iranian attacks on the Gulf targets have been relatively moderate. They have not unleashed total war. If there had been total war, hundreds and hundreds of casualties would have taken place, including, I must add, a very large number of Indians. Their targeting has been precise. It is very likely that some of their drones and missiles have been blocked. But overall, many of their attacks have been demonstrative rather than effective in terms of casualties. They've kept away from that. And I think that is why Iran has a vested interest in the security and stability of the Gulf. It has an economic stake in the prosperity of the Gulf. It therefore, ultimately, when there is reconstruction to be done in Iran, when investments are required for the development of their economy, they will have to turn to the Gulf countries. So I would say to you as of now that yes, there has been an extraordinary restraint on the part of the Iranian military establishment. I know that both the Israelis and the Americans had desperately wanted a massive Iranian assault upon the Gulf so that the Gulf would have willy-nilly shifted near permanently into the American-Israeli camp. Many of them had started saying that this would be the occasion for the expansion of the Abraham Accords. The assessments coming from the Gulf are quite different. Today, every objective Gulf commentator says we have two areas of concern with regard to our security: Iran and Israel. Israel made it very clear that it wishes to establish itself as the regional hegemon. And therefore, they targeted Doha in September last year for no rhyme or reason. They were making it clear to the Qataris and by extension to all the countries of the GCC that every one of you is within our targeting range, and we can attack any one of you, whether you are in your palace or your energy installations or your military installations or your iconic tower. We can bring every one of them down. That was the signal given. And it was understood, immediately understood by the GCC countries. Therefore, there is what you are looking at today is an attempt by the GCC over the short to medium term to build arrangements that would ensure their own safety and security vis-a-vis these two targets that they, vis-a-vis these two foes that they have in the region. I'm not now what the Americans are trying desperately to achieve, and many of their commentators are saying this, that the GCC has no option but to go back to the Americans. The question is why? Why would they go back? You say, oh, Iran cannot be trusted. Can the Americans be trusted? I have been asking this in the last 35 to 40 years. When have the Americans ever acted in support of the interests of the GCC and lived up to their responsibility as the guardians of the region and as security guarantors of their partners? What are the partners able to do? They simply affirm their ties with the Americans by buying military equipment. Military equipment that is never used in war. They are not warriors as of now. They are people who depend on someone else for their security. That is, over a medium to long term, hopefully, I have written in an article that the only option for the GCC is to A, become united, and B, develop shared and joint military capabilities. You can no longer depend on anyone else. Sadly, to answer your question, what is likely to happen, I am very worried that the divide within the GCC is expanding rather than narrowing. And that is something which will harm the long-term interests of the region. So I think that we can sit and speculate about where things will go. But as of now, the UAE-Saudi divide, the UAE's increasing affiliation with the Israelis, and the strategic changes that are taking place within the very fragile region, particularly in the Gulf of Aden and the Bab al-Mandeb and in Somaliland, I think these should be very worrying in terms of long-term security concerns of the region.
Ambassador Saab, thank you very much for your once again an enlightening discourse, and as always, you're honest, candid, and forthright, and also very thoughtful. And so I found your remarks quite interesting and educational. So once again, thank you very much for joining Khanversations. We are extremely grateful to you for your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. I wish you all the best.